And we are live. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to Forever Sports for a lunchtime show. Unfortunately, we couldn't do the show this morning. As such, we are live at lunchtime and hopefully we'll still have as many people jumping into the comments and as many people discussing. And the big thing I want to discuss today is the long-term sort of future for some of the players and whether we kind of get into a stage of kind of a bit of almost like a last gun salute type of situation for some of the older players who are struggling to find game time in this very new look Springbok side, which is doing the business. And I think that's very exciting. But it also kind of spells the end of an era to a certain degree. And that's what I kind of want to chat about today is which sort of players are we seeing being kind of sort of phased out and, at what point do you make those decisions? At what point might we start seeing players announcing their retirements, for example? What point might we see, players starting to step away? And because you don't want to be a player that just never gets selected again. You kind of want to be able to say, right, I'm retiring, get a last game kind of thing, guard on top, and be able to sort of make a retirement rather than just not be selected ever again, and then you kind of just sort of fade out of the game. Because there's a lot of players who I think deserve their flowers and deserve a bit of a send-off and deserve, to have people, or to do the opportunity to have people appreciate what they've done. And some of those players even involved this weekend. For example, the likes of Bongi Manambi, who has not played a lot this year. And if he's going to start moving away from sort of the international stage a little bit, he's a player with, a double World Cup winner, for example, played over 50 tests for the Boks. He's a player that deserves the opportunity to go out on his terms, type of thing. And I think, it's an interesting situation where a lot of players are having to think really hard about where they are, what their future is. And I think that some of them, for example, are in a bit of a situation where they might think to themselves, yeah, listen, this is kind of the end for me, and I'm starting to get into the side, for example. The younger players are already playing well. But at the same time, it's a bit of a catch-22 or double-edged sword because you don't want to basically put your hand up and say, right, that's me, I'm done. The new players are in. I'm going to say that I'm going to step away. I'm going to go out on my terms, for example, and there it is. And then all of a sudden, there's a positional crisis, for example, and you're going to sit there saying, oh, hang on, I could have actually played. So there's always the continuous sort of catch-22, and I think that very few players get the opportunity to kind of always go out on their terms and be able to play a final game. Some of the All Blacks players, for example, retired, or Dwayne Vermeulen. Not everybody gets the Dwayne Vermeulen fairy tale ending. Francois Lowe as well, where they play in a World Cup final, beat Tawera, and they win the World Cup, and that's their final game. That is the stuff of miracles, of legends, really, to be able to go out on top. And I'm not saying that all these players need to start retiring either. I think that's. For example, I mentioned Bongi Manambi, and he gets an opportunity this weekend, but he's somebody who's sort of falling down the ranks a little bit with regards to our first choice, second choice, third choice hooker. And I think he's probably sort of competing for really about third or fourth choice, to be honest. I do think that at this stage, we are tending to play Jan Wessels and Amaris van der Merwe ahead of him. Whether that might change, whether we had a World Cup final tomorrow, they might back him. But we're talking about a player who's played 87 times for the Springboks. He's 13 away from the 100th. This will be 88 when he gets on this weekend. And it's a big opportunity for him to try and maybe make a push for 100 caps. But he's only 34 years old, and that I think is quite important in terms of he's still got a couple of years in him. So the World Cup is not out of his reach by any stretch of the imagination from an age point of view. So I don't think we're going to see him, for example, step away. At the end of the day, he's going to keep fighting for his opportunity. He turns 35 come January. He will be 36 going to the next World Cup. He's still kind of in the selection frame. So we're not going to, for example, see him put his hand up and say, right, I'm done. Akubus Reinach, for example, also, he's not going to put up his hand and say, right, now he's done when he's busy starting for the Springboks and he's moving back to South Africa to play against, or play for the Stormers rather, and keep himself in the mix. But he's a player who turns 36 in January, will be 37 at the next World Cup. So right now, you're looking at him thinking, well, he's still playing some really good rugby. He's still getting selected for the Boks. Why would he step away? But for me, it's players like a Vincent Koch, for example. Now, Vincent Koch is, and a Willie Leroux. We're talking about now the real senior statesman. Vincent Koch is 35 years, will be 36 next year, will be 37 the next World Cup. And the reason I mentioned Vincent Koch is if we look at his 2024-25 season, he has played a sum total of 2 matches for the Boks. He's played 36 and 33 matches. So he's basically played less than 70 matches for the Boks this season. He played against Italy, he played against Georgia, and that's been it. He has not played in any of the 5 Rugby Championship games and will not take part in the Rugby Championship. This despite the fact that Nasanatin Tlabakanye has had to step away from the Boks whilst he sorts out his case, for example. So, it's not just because there's just so many tight heads. I think tight head's still a bit of a question mark position, but he's not played. And I'm trying to find a way of almost saying we didn't miss him without sounding really mean, but, we've coped. Vilkolo and Thomas Satoy are doing a job. You've got a Netling Bashir who's a bit younger. You've got an Asanat and Klabikanya who they predict as the future. We have to wait and see what happens, whether he's going to be available come the new year. And I really hope they manage to get that case sorted. But I think something like a Vincent Koch, it now comes to a situation where do you now start to think, and not even just on your terms, he now will probably play for the Boks once again this year. Maybe he doesn't, but I think he probably will. And I think the main point which sort of was what I'm saying is all of these players, it's now or never. They have got to prove in the next 6 to 8 months, really. I think going into the New Zealand series next year, we kind of need to almost know. They've basically got a year, maybe, at a push to prove that they can get to the next World Cup and that they are going to be good enough to get into the next World Cup. And good enough to be considered, I think, even that. Some of them, for example, might not make the next World Cup. And they might really, really try and just not get the selection. And if that's the case, then fair play. But they've got to now show in the next year that they should still be in the selection frame. So when Vincent Koch goes back to the Sharks, for example, and I imagine he'll go back after this weekend and play for them a couple of times for the end-of-year tour, he needs to start making some big opportunities count. Kubus Ranach, for example, I think every time he goes out at the moment, as a 35-year-old, he has to keep reminding the Bok management that he is still at this level. And I think he has with some of his performances so far this year. But when you get to that age, you've got to keep reminding them because there's other players who already take that jersey. And this is the interesting thing. You've got a Kanan Moody. Now, he's fighting neck and neck now with JC Creel for that jersey. JC Creel is not a player who's going to be too old in the next World Cup. But he now needs to show that he can still boss the number 13 channel and that he is, as good, if not a better option than a Kanan Moody for certain games. And it's a really exciting position to be in. The fact that you've got older players who for years, no one has really challenged them. I think Jesse Creel, for example, got benched for the Kanya. He had to really work on himself and he came through and nobody could touch him in the 2023 World Cup. Now, he's being challenged once again, but this time by Kanan Moody. So, he's a player that's been challenged before and he's had to sometimes be dropped down, come back. But all of a sudden, we are seeing players challenge our older guard and challenge our really legendary players for their positions. We're seeing that with Ruan Nokia. He's come in and said to Frank Moster and Lurt Yaga, I'm here, and I'm a genuine option. In fact, maybe I'm the best option. We're seeing a Sashfami Gomazulu come in and say, unlucky Libok, unlucky Andre, I'm in the mix now, and I can play here, and I'm going to do a job here. Ethan Hooker, I think, has done that at 11 as well. He's now sort of sent a bit of a warning to a Kurtley Orenser, to a Maxwell Pimpi, somebody else who might be sort of considering it, that he's here and he's not going anywhere. So it's a really cool situation to be in because it speaks to the depth that we have. The fact that we are talking about double World Cup winners here, British and Irish Lions Series winners, being pushed and having their jerseys almost, dragged away from them. And we always talk about the fact that there is no A or B side. But at the end of the day, come the next World Cup, we can only take 33 players, I think it is. Could even be 32. And which of the players are going to be in that mix? Which of the players are going to make that trip? Which of the players right now, because I'm pretty sure you probably find the Bok management will kind of have a bit of a skeleton squad. And we're going to be doing that, especially after the Rugby Championship. We're going to review kind of our World Cup squad barometer and sort of see who's kind of in the mix, assuming everyone's fit. And I think there's certain players based past the Rugby Championship who have put their names firmly in that selection hat. The likes of a Sachfam Gomazulu has shown that I think he's going to be ready for the next World Cup. I think Mani Leibok is a player who maybe post the Australia game, or according to some people, maybe wasn't quite, might have been in that kind of almost like the orange, or maybe, pencil, the question mark. The last couple of games he's had has put them right back in there saying, actually, hang on, this is players here to stay. And I think that a lot of these players, even the injured players, they're not necessarily going to be worried in terms of, like, Curtly Arns is not sitting at home thinking he's not going to play for the Boks again. But he's now watching Ethan Hooker take that opportunity and put in those performances. And that means that it's a warning that if he comes back, he has to hit his best straps. Because if he's not performing and if he has a lull, this player is ready to take the jersey. And I think it's that competition for jersey, that pride in trying to keep your jersey and get and fight for every single test appearance you get. That's going to bring out the best in players. Going into some of the comments, K3A, one of our loyal members says, how's it something I've been thinking about recently? Do we have the depth in SA Rugby to have two completely separate squads? One for the Rugby Championship and one for hypothetical Seven Nations? If not, where are we lacking? Well, the problem is, from a Six Nations point of view, is will we play availability, I suppose, to a certain degree? In theory, there's a Southern Hemisphere and a Northern Hemisphere window. So, in terms of when players are allowed to be released, that's kind of governed by World Rugby. And in theory, if you're South African qualified, you fall into the Southern Hemisphere test windows, which means you wouldn't actually get released if you're playing for a Premiership club, for example. If you're playing for a top 14 club, if you're playing for any club, really, they wouldn't be forced to release you during the Seven Nations if you were to play as Seven Nations. So that's a logistical issue to have. Same thing with Japan, for example. In terms of having this the depth available, I mean, you could. I mean, obviously, you could put together two squads. Whether we'd be able to compete on both fronts, probably not. I mean, I think you'd probably have to choose a strongest inverted commas squad. But if you think that right now we've got a 33-man squad and you've got Amali Ibar, Kasash Famagama, and Ohandre Pollard, if you are creating a different squad, and maybe even if you release one of them, who's the backup? Now you're going Jordan Hendrickson, a decent player, but maybe not playing the best rugby of his career so far. And I think in certain positions, you certainly can. If you go look at our wing stocks, for example, and you say, right, we need 3 wings in the main squad, or 4 wings in the main squad, and you've got Kurt Lawrence, Cheslin Colby, Edel van der Merwe, and Ethan Hooker, for the sake of it. You still then got a Makazoma Pimpy, for example. Or let's say, I think 3 wings is probably enough, to be honest, but so you can go Kirkley, Cheslin, Edville. Let's just go with those 3, for example. Then in the second squad, you could have a Mapimpi, an Ethan Hooker, and who can we look at? Who are some of the wings that are already on form? You could take Caden, for example, if you don't look at outside centre. So I think that we could formulate a reasonable squad. Maybe, I don't think it would necessarily come last in the Six Nations. I don't think we necessarily compete. I think, for example, positions like outside centre would be a problem for us. We've kind of got Jesse Creel and Kanan Moody, but if Lekan Young gets back to fit, as Henko and Veig stays fit, then you might have those sort of options. So I think at certain positions you're right, other positions you might struggle. If we had everybody fit, if you waved a magic wand and everybody was fit, which is almost impossible to do, it's then you're probably okay. I mean, you look at Lockstocks, for example, Jean-Claude, Archer, Eben, Franco, Ruan Okia, Sal Murad, Kurbis Visa. I'm missing somebody as well. I mean, that's 7 locks, and that's not even looking at a Ruben van Heerden or, the likes of that. So you could probably find enough locks in a squad. If you look at scrum halves, we've got scrum halves. I mean, Jaden Hendrick's not even part of the squad, for example. He's a World Cup winner. Grant Herschel Yankees went to France. He's a World Cup winner, not even involved in the squad for the last how many years. You still got Nico Stain, for example, who's on the fringes. You got a Harsh and P coming through. So scrum halves, happy days. But I think there's certain positions where you might struggle with that regard. Upfilling is Harold Foss still there for the Bulls. Now Jan Surfertain is back, as far as I understand he is. Carlos says, I was hoping Fife would replace Kurbis for this game to give him some time to prove himself too. Albert says, I predict Jan Hendricks Essels will become our most valuable forward by 2027. As Double Up says, Vitsukak last played a game on the 19th of July versus Georgia and will not play again until November at this stage, despite having been fit for pretty much all those games. Albert says, as much as I like JC, it doesn't seem like he has the X factor that Moody does. And he says, unfair on Creel, unlike some of the older players, he still played really good until recently. And I think that's the really good part, is the fact that we've got players who haven't played badly, but there's other players who are playing better. And you look at, for example, a Stuart McCloskey for Ireland. Really, really good centre, would make most international squads. But he's now competing with Bandiaki, Gary Ringrose, Robbie Henshaw, and the embarrassment of riches at centre for Ireland. Whereas I think if you look at Ireland post Johnny Sexton, their number 10s are a problem. I think Sam Prendergast's talented, but I don't think he's quite the finished product. Jack Crowley had a really nice first season, but there's just, not quite something there. You look at the Byrne brothers. So some positions are really hotly contested, and other positions I think there's just not as much depth. AJS says Kirtley Aronson has the 11 jersey locked in. Albert says Kirtley is in trouble because Hooker gives Rassie something different, especially in wet weather. Campo says, will we see Ed van der Merwe in the team again, or will he only be called up because of injuries? I'm really hoping he'll travel at the end of the year. He's such a good player. I mean, he played that first game for the Sharks and just continues to show. So it's an embarrassment of riches, really, from a wing point of view. I would have him in London right now ahead of Maxima Pimpy. Personally, I think it would make more sense. I think he's in better form. I think he's a better age profile. And that's what I would have. And I think we'll see that at the end of the year. I hope we'll see that at the end of the year because he's a phenomenal player. AJS said, I would never take Kirtley out of a match day 15. Even if Hooker wins man of the match against Argentina, Aronson can always break open a game. Very solid to the high ball and on defense. And then saying, are you relieved we don't have to play against DuPont in November? No, I'm disappointed, actually. I'm quite bleak we're not playing against him. Because, we talk about all the tribalism and all these big conversations and the big debates, and we're talking about best player in the world and the likes of that. I want to play against DuPont, and I want to beat them. That's what you want to do, when you have these big debates, because, that whole French game, lots of people sit there saying, oh, but the referee was this, and he was coming back injured. You want to be able to play against the best in the world and see where they can do it against you. Anton DuPont's barely played against the Springboks. If he's played 3 games, I'd be surprised against the Boks, and I want to see him do what he does against other teams to the Boks, and I'm not going to sit there and say he's not the best player in the world. I think he's incredibly talented. I think he's probably one of the most complete players that's ever played the game. But at the same time, I want to see him play against the Boks and do those things. It's always the best players do it against the best teams, and he's done it time and time again against some of the best teams in the world. But I want to see him do it against the Boks. I really want to see him do it against a team right now who's playing really, really good rugby, and that we're not going to get to see that is sad. It's sad, So the last time, so he played them in 2023, I think it was 2022, when we lost to France 12-11. In the Autumn Nation series. That was obviously was that 2022, yeah, ahead of the World Cup, the year before the World Cup, and then obviously lost against South Africa before that. Has he played? I don't think when was the last time he played France? Back in like 2018-19, and I don't think he was playing. So he's played us twice. There we go. South Africa lost. He came on as a sub for 13 minutes back in 2018. And I think that should probably be it. I feel like we haven't played France a lot in ages. So he's played 2 matches against. There we go. South Africa lost 24 minutes back in 2017. So he's played against South Africa and he's only beaten the Boks once. Four out of, so he's got 25% win rate. So again, I'd love to see him play against us and change that and go and put in a man of the match performance against currently the best team in the world. So I'm sad we're not playing against them. I always want to play against the best teams. If it's a World Cup, you sit there going, oh, I'm sad, but you're thinking this is a big opportunity for us. In like November, I think it's a big grudge match. We're going over there to prove that we are better than France. That it wasn't a fluke of World Cup victory. And if you go and beat France in France at the same place where you knocked them out, it's a massive statement. So I'd really, really like us to go and do that. And I'm very sad he's not playing. Tokolosh asking, why was Morne van den Berg not selected? It's a very good question. I would have liked to have seen him. I can't give you an answer. Obviously, Kubas and with the Sasha comments is what they're going with. But before we go into more comments, people, we are doing a 1 member per day push. And if we do that, we get to over 300 members by the end of the year. We got our member yesterday. So there must be someone currently watching. And the 100 people watching, there's a lot of you guys that aren't members. There must be our 1 new member for the day. And if you would like to become a member, please go and click the link in the pinned comment. It's a very small nominal amount. It's less than a can of Coke at a restaurant. It is that small, but it makes a huge difference for us. So if you are Because like to become a member, you get a very cool little animation that goes on the screen with your name on it and the whole thing. Please do go and get a link and join the members club. And if you'd like to feature in the Rassie's Coach's Corner over here, go and drop a hot take and with a super chat, and you can go into that box over there. Mike says Edward 13. I think that's a good idea. So Albert saying I want to see what Sasha FM can do against France end of year tour. Yeah, I think that's going to be quite a cool thing. Double Up says, can you think on a squad versus Japan? Off the top of my head, who I'd like to see against Japan. Well, let's say we want to try and rest the bulk of our players for that France game. So, number 1, Jan-Hendrik Wessels. Number 2, or Bone Fenton. Let's go Bone Fenton, number 1. Number 2, Marnus van der Merwe. Number 3, let's go... Let's go Volkolo, number 3. And he can be on the bench the week after. Number 4, 5, I would go with Arches Neyman and Ruan Nokia or Leo Diaga, either way, depending on their fit. 6, 7, 8, I would go Marco Verstappen. I would go Paddy PSTF the toy, because I think he's a player that enjoys playing rugby and he won't play anything from now until the end. He actually hasn't played that much rugby this year, as much as people keep saying he needs a rest. And 8th man, I would go with... Jasper Wiese actually hasn't played that much, so I'll start with Jasper Wiese. 9, I would go Morne van den Berg. 10, I would go Mani Liebach. 11, I would probably go, if he's fit, I'd go Kurt Lawrence. 14, I'd go Edward van der Merwe. My centre pairing would be Damian Willemse and Kaden Moody. And my 15 would be Fussy. That's probably off the top of my head what I can just think of in terms of a bit of rotation. That's kind of what I'd like to see off the bench. A Jan-Hendrik Wessels, maybe a Netley Bashir, a Gerard Steenekamp. That's a nice one that can come back and at loose head. You can have a Franco Mostert on the bench. You could have a Quacker Smith continues to always play, so you could have him on the bench, or a Marco van Staden coming in. You could have a Faf de Klerk as an impact player, or you could start him, have Morny on the bench. You could have Andre Pollard to give him a run ahead of the France game. You can go a 6-2 split because you got Sasha, you got David Williams playing there, so you could go with Andre Esterhazen. That's kind of probably the sort of the way I'd like to see it. Kenneth says, it hurts me to say, but I don't know if Jesse has the wheels required for the style we seem to move to. Look, Jesse's rapid, eh? Jesse is rapid. Maybe always see it, but I remember that try he scored against Wales 2 years ago, 2023, before the World Cup. That man is proper quick. So I think he'd be okay. I think it's just the way he plays, for example. I think if you give him a space. Mike Lass, how does become a member work? So basically, it's a small monthly amount. You get some perks, for example. You get a whole bunch of new emojis. You get a little badge next to your name, which changes depending on how long you've been a member. Some of the training stuff that we do a bit of exclusive content. Some of the content we do is members first, for example, so you get to see it. And then 2 weeks later, for example, we then open up for public, so you get access to a whole bunch of different perks within the members club as well. We are also looking at doing a members club only prediction leagues, for example, with exclusive prizes. We also get Boks tickets away to members as well, and we're going to be doing that next year as well. So Boks tickets, potential giveaways exclusive to our members club. So those are some of the perks, to name a few. Anti says Ulrich Low next 8. AJ says France is the only team as a Bok fan, and I'm nervous to play. Kid Senegal says I doubt any player will retire from international rugby only while they're still playing club rugby, like we see cricket, for example. We do see it. It's not maybe as common, but we do see it sometimes. We often see it. Obviously, a lot of the All Black players do that, because as soon as they leave, they kind of then become ineligible, and a lot of players do that. They kind of make the decision to go abroad and hang their boots up. Sometimes we do then see them come back, for example. So I get your point. It's not like cricket, for example, which is so franchise driven. Even football, in fairness, a lot of players do hang up their international career boots and just sort of focus on club. Not quite the same in rugby. I do think we might see it more in rugby, to be honest. I think you might see players go and say, well, you know what, I can go earn big money in the Japan second league, and I'm going to go do that or I can go join a franchise or a Prem team, for example. I might not start, I might not get as much game time as I want, but at the end of the day, they still offer me more money than what I'm earning, and I'm happy to go and be a bit part player, earn a big packet, and sort of set up my family over there. And if that means I don't play for the Boks, that means I don't play for the Boks. So there is far more isolated circumstances than there is cricket, where a lot of people do. Heinrich Klaassen, for example, Quinton de Kock coming back. So I get your point. It's a very good point, actually. But I do think there are still some people who might do it. Also, I think it's a certain amount of even the idea of sort of putting family first, you know. So if you play for Alliance, for example, you're going to go away for more than a week, 6 or 7 weeks in a calendar year, for example. You know, so you're going to go on this tour now for 3 weeks, and you're going to have Select Champions Cup, and you might be away for maybe 9 to 10 weeks in total over the year. And that's one of the big reasons that Jacques spoke about the fact that he didn't want to come back to international rugby. Because if you play for the Boks, you are in camp, which is not necessarily where you live, by the way. You are in camp, I think it's 17, 18 weeks of a year. I mean, they've been in camp almost consecutively since the end of June. So that's the entire July, the entire August, the entire September, and the entire November. That's basically 4 months that you could be away from home if you play international rugby. So, for example, you look at a Vincent Koch, who's got a family and a young family. He might sit there, and his family, I imagine, is based in Durban. He might sit there and say, I've been away from my family for 3 months so far this year, and I've played less than 80 minutes of rugby. Is that worth it? And for some people it is, and some people they say it's great, but some people say, you know what, I'm happy with what I've done. I've done everything I can in my career. I actually want to be there with my children. I want to grow up. I want to see them grow up. I want to be at home, and that's the decision they make. That's often a decision a lot of these players do make, is the fact that they basically step back and say, I want to be with my family, and that's what I kind of want to focus on. Albert says, the problem with France is they have the forward pack to match us. Double Up says, 7, Vincent Tuka. Oh, yeah, no, he's talk dirty. Speak my language. Yeah, get my boy Vincent in. I really hope that he does go at the end of your tour. Torlish says, hey, Steve, what is your obsession with Marnus? I just think he's such a good all-round player. I mean, I think that he is... I mean, I just watched his games for the Scarlets, and I just think that hooker is a position that we have struggled with in 2023, with the injury to Malcolm Marx, then the injury to Bongi Manambi. And I think that we haven't really had a specialist hooker. We've kind of made do with Dion Fourie, made do with Mark Van Staden. Even a young injured Vessels is more of an out-and-out hooker than the others. But he's also very common as a new hybrid player. And I look at Marnus van der Merwe, packs a decent punch, you know, over 100 kgs, 28 years of age. He'll be 30 years at the next World Cup. I think he's pretty solid from his line-out work, for example, and he's a phenomenal jackler. I think he was in the top 10 most turnovers across all club leagues in this last season. So I think we get that Malcolm Marx alternative as a fetcher, and we saw it in that the Wellington game. He had a very important turnover. So I just like to see more of him, to see if he can produce what I've seen at club level and international level. So, because I just think that right now, you know, I look at Bongi Manambi's form, I look at Marnus van der Merwe, and I'd like to see him get that opportunity to stake a claim. Because if Malcolm Marx goes down, I don't want to go into a World Cup where Jan Inge Vessels, you know, has played half his games at hooker, I mean, at prop, and he's our number one hooker. Mark Van Staden's on the bench, or Marnus van der Merwe is playing his 5th game. I'd like to see us really bring in 2 new hookers and give them those opportunities and build that genuine depth at hooker. And I just think that he's a great player and should be part of that. Mikey Larry says, what is the All Blacks doing wrong? I feel Razor's trying to win every match, not devote younger talent. Is like playing part every single game. I do think there should have been more rotation with that All Black side. I do think that there's not been enough experimentation or bringing in some new players. They are lacking experience. And I think they are lacking leadership in that team. I think that I think he's got the captaincy wrong. I think it should be Artie Savia. I think he's a heart and sleeve type player, an inspirational type player. And I think he should be the leading. I think that they miss having enough experience at scrum half. I think that Burden Barrett's a phenomenal player. I'm not sure he suits what Razor wants to try and do at flower half. And I think that there are some big selection calls. I think at the end of the day, I think their front row has got talent, but I just don't think it's really good enough. I've said it for a while. And they just started to get better last year, and everybody told me that, you know, that All Black front row is brilliant and you know, like they can match the Bok front row. And I said I wasn't convinced. They probably had the worst scrum this year so far. This year, where we literally put the ball they had the ball put under their feet, and within half a second it was under Kwaka Smith's feet. So I think that their front row is not good enough, and I think that that's not being paid enough attention to. Even the tight 5 itself, they're really missing a Birdie Retallick. They're really missing a Sam Whitelock. I think they are missing a Sam Kane. I think they are missing Aaron Smith. I think they just need a bit more experience and a bit more... not even continuity, because that's the problem. There's almost been too much continuity, but I think they miss having a new squad with enough fresh players. I mean, I think Ruben Ludd's a phenomenal player. We've barely seen him. And I think that Cam Roygaard's a great player, but I do think they're missing a lot of experience at scrum half. And I think that's the big thing. They're missing experience in key positions. And I just don't think he even begins to know what his top team is and what his different types of teams are. Who's his best center combination? I think that's also a big problem. He doesn't understand what's his best loose trio, what's his best lock pairing. And it's not even about, who's our best pairing, but what are my best combinations? If I play a Geordie Barrett at 12, who's the best 13? If Geordie Barrett's not going to play at 12, who should be playing at 13? Or if I want my 13 to be this player, who's a better 12 for them? If I'm going to play this 9-10 combination, what do my centers have to look like? Because I think that's where the Springboks are. I think if they're going, we're going to play a Sasha at 10 or Kobus Reinach at 9, we can then go with a Damon Delende 12, 13, for example. You've got Mani Libbok at 10. He's a distributor. So you then want to make sure that your 12, 13s, and even your 4 are really attacking nature players that can get into space and can read and can anticipate where Marnie wants to go, because he's that kind of player. That's why I think Andre Esterhuizen really suits Marnie Libbok, because I think he understands a bit more kind of what Marnie wants and a long pass and holding out wide, whereas Damien Bedendi prefers to be closer to the action, closer to the ball. And again, some of those combinations. Who's the good lock combination? Who's the good number 5 and number 2 combination? Also something that people don't think about. Hooker and your number 5. Your number 5 ran the line out. So you want to make sure that your number 5 is in track with your hooker. So even those are combinations. Rugby for me is all about combinations. Your 1-3 combination, your 4-5, your loose trio, your 9-10s, 13s, your back 3 as a combination. Those are all the different combinations you see. As I said, your 2 and your 5 from a line-out point of view. You talk about combinations like defensively, your generals on defense. Frans Maheu was a big communicator on defense. Wayne Vermeulen was a big communicator on defense. Your outside center is a very important player with regards to how the defensive structures of your backline works. And you've got to make sure you've got the right boxes being ticked, because that's the problem. You've got this big shopping list almost, or tick box checklist of things you need in a rugby team. And it's not just 1 to 15. I need a loose head prop. I need a hooker. I need because they've all got roles. And I think what the Boks have done so intelligently is they go and draw up a list of everything they need. Goal kicker, X-factor wing with finishing, jackler, player who can get over the advantage line, line-out threat, high ball threat, those type of things. And they basically go through and say, right, these are all the different things we need. Now, where do we fill them? So if we pick Ox, that gives us our proper scrummager. Whereas if we pick a Jan Vessels, we maybe lose the scrummager, but we've got a really big, we've got a really good ball carrier and a really quick play around the park. Okay, cool. So what does that tick? If you pick a Manus van der Merwe versus Bongi Manambi, or Manus van der Merwe, you get the jackal option. Bongi Manambi probably a bit more physical, and they kind of look at it as, how can we tick all the boxes we need within our team to be able to implement our game plan? So if we pick Andre Pollard, we now got goal kicking ticked, for example. You've got a good defender at 10 ticked, and you've got a potential ball carrier. But you need a distributor. So then they say, right, so because we've got him, we now have to pick a Willie Leroux, for example, because he's a good distributor, or even a Damien Willemse. And I think that's maybe where the All Blacks are falling a bit short, is I think that there are certain departments or roles that aren't being filled with some of the selections. And I think that is potentially an aspect that Razor needs to look at, is understanding what are they missing, not in terms of who they're missing, what are they missing? Are they missing a brute force number 4 enforcer like Brody Retallick was when he won the World Player of the Year? Okay, so we're missing an enforcer. Are there any number 4 locks, for example, that can do that role? Or else do we need to find a number 8 that can do that role? I think Wallace Titi is a phenomenal player, but I think they've gone too Vai in the number 6 series to try and add physicality. Is he the right player? Or other players out there. Simon Parker's come through, and I think he looks pretty promising. But I do think that that's something that I think the All Blacks are sometimes are missing a little bit, is they don't tick all the different departments all the time. And unfortunately, then you can find chinks in the armor, because you're only as strong as your weakest point. And if your weakest point is exploitable, then teams will exploit that. K3A says the Bulls players with the Boks are joining the Bulls in Europe and then staying in Europe until November test. That's a long shift. I think some of them will come back. Ruan Nokia, I don't expect to see him play for the Bulls. I think he'll come back. Stephen Ford says, agree long-term, Albert, he should be the next number 7, but until PSF the toy retires, where does he slot into a full-strength team? 5-3 split, only leave space for Archie and Kwaka. 6-2 Boks, usually take and lock. Double Up says, my squad versus Japan is 1 Jan Vessels, 2 Miles van der Merwe, 3 Volko Low, 4 Kobus Visa, 5 Arcus Neyman, 6 Marco van Staden, 7 Vince Tuka, Ulrich Low, number 8. Unfortunately, he'll only be back next year. Then going Morne Vandenberg, Money Buck on the 9-10, Mapimpi, Edville, Hendricks, Jordan Hendricks at 15 is an interesting shout, and then Ethan Hooker and Jesse Kruger as centre combination. Not a terrible. Heath Carey says, would you agree the following Boks have fallen into the fringe category? Bongi, Mapimpi, Koch, Mostert, Luert, Faf, Villy. Yeah, definitely. I think Luert's the only one who's probably maybe not as much in that category. I think that they still view him as a proper option. But I think Bongi's in the fringes. I think Mapimpi's in the fringes. Koch's in the fringes. Mostert. I'm surprised Mostert's in the fringes because I thought the last game he played against Australia, he played really well. He sorted out the breakdown issue. He got around the park. He made a lot of tackles. So I'm almost surprised that we went from there to just not see him again. I would be interested to see if we had seen him this weekend, if he hadn't stayed behind with the family bereavement. But yeah, I think you pretty much bang on over there in terms of the lads who just seem to kind of almost be falling into the fringes, falling into kind of the peripheries. Mike Larry says, who takes the number 6 and 7 jersey post-World Cup, looking at our players we have right now? Cameron Honecorn, Vincent Tuka, Jasper Visa. That would be my post-World Cup back 3. Right now, as it stands. That would be my both. Ruan Fenter as well. Get Ruan Fenter involved. I think Ruan Fenter and Vincent Tuka are going to compete for that jersey. Ruan Fenter's just barbaric, isn't he, with the way he plays. Vincent Tuka's probably a better soft skills type of player. Ruan Fenter's got so much power. He's a phenomenal player, and I think that Ulrich Low will contest for them. I think Ulrich Low is looking really good off the bench. I think he's really enjoying that bomb squad role he had last year. Be interested to see what his role will be when he is back. Kieran says, who can beat the Boks at the World Cup? In my opinion, only France or Australia, since they're at home. We don't know what the All Blacks going to look like come the next World Cup. AJS says, you're forgetting about Cameron Harnekom and Batabile Hlakani. Yeah, talking about the fact that Steven spoke about Ulrich, Vincent, Ben Jason Dixon, Khaleesi, Kwaka Age for start isn't world class. Yeah, I think Cameron Harnekom for me should be a 6 project. I think he's got everything he needs to play in the number 6 jersey. He's a good jackler over the ball. He's got the engine. He's got the work rate. He can play at 8 or 6, and I think 6 is kind of more where we need more players to come through and do a role. Rudy says, I don't think Franco is a bench player. He's a workhorse more than an impact player, and at the moment, Rowan is filling that niche for us, just not for him at the moment, sadly. Yeah, but to be fair, again, Ruan O'Kea gets injured, all of a sudden you draft Franco Mossa and happy days. So it's a good situation to be in. It's a nice situation to be in, and we're very lucky to have the kind of depth that we are speaking about. People, before we wrap up, anybody want to become our 1 member for the day? You can obviously do it afterwards and retrospectively. So if you are watching retrospectively, please do consider becoming our member for the day. Look, I mean, ideally you can get 2 or 3 members and give us a bit of a buffer. Otherwise, we're going to have to try, and at this stage, we're going to have to try and catch up a few on Saturday, which hopefully, and sometimes we do. But if you would like to, please do consider becoming a member. We will keep track of that and see if we can keep getting our 1 member per day for the rest of the year. Maybe we'll have a bit of a countdown and look at the days we haven't and how many days behind we are when it comes to our members. But please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. We will be live back tomorrow morning. Hoppers 9. See you there. Keep safe, keep well. And let me know what you think of the players who are on the fringes.